The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the TFS horizon. Admiral Jake Morrison stood by the large window, watching distant suns twinkle like tiny diamonds against the black space. He had been doing this job for 20 years, and every day still amazed him. Humanity had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years now, but there were always new worlds to discover. "Admiral, we're getting close to the Kepler system," said Captain Ben Rodriguez from his seat at the control panel. Ben was young, maybe 30 years old, with bright eyes that still held wonder when he looked at new star systems. Like most people his age, Ben had never seen a real war. The last big fight humanity had was over 3,000 years ago. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her science station. She was studying readings from their sensors, trying to find planets that might have life on them. "The third planet looks interesting," she said. "It has water and the right temperature for humans to live there." Jake nodded and walked over too. "Look at her screen." The planet appeared green and blue, just like Earth. "Any signs of people living there already?" "Yes, actually. I'm picking up some small settlements. Looks like humans got there before us." Lisa smiled. "Should we go say hello?" This was normal for human explorers. Over the centuries, brave families had traveled to distant worlds to start new lives. Most of these colonies stayed in touch with Earth, but some were so far away that messages took years to travel back and forth. The Terran Federation tried to visit all human settlements at least once every few decades to make sure everyone was doing well. "Set course for the planet," Jake ordered. "Let's see how our fellow humans are doing out here." The horizon moved through space toward the planet. Jake thought about how different things were now compared to the old days. His grandfather used to tell him stories about the ancient times when humans fought terrible wars against each other and against alien species. Back then, human ships carried powerful weapons, and soldiers trained for battle every day. But that was long ago. The Treaty of Centauri Prime had ended all of that. For 3,000 years, humans had lived in peace with their neighbors in the galaxy. Sure, there were still disagreements sometimes, but people solved them by talking, not fighting. Human military ships like the Horizon carried only basic defensive systems, just in case they ran into space pirates or dangerous animals on unexplored worlds. "We're getting a signal from the planet," Ben announced. "Someone down there wants to talk to us." "Put them on screen," Jake said. A friendly face appeared on the main display. It was a man with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing simple farming clothes. "Welcome to Haven's Rest," the man said with a big smile. "I'm Steve Collins, the mayor of our little colony. You don't get many visitors out here." "Hello, Mayor Collins. I'm Admiral Morrison with the Terran Federation. We're on an exploration mission and thought we'd stop by to see how you're all doing." "That's wonderful. We'd love to have you visit. It's been 12 years since we last saw a Federation ship. Why don't you come down for dinner? My wife makes the best vegetable stew this side of the galaxy." Jake laughed. This was why he loved his job. Humans, no matter how far from Earth they traveled, were still friendly and welcoming. "We'd be honored to join you, Mayor." A few hours later, Jake, Lisa, and Ben stood in the main square of Haven's Rest. The colony was small but beautiful. Neat houses lined clean streets, and everywhere they looked, there were gardens full of colorful flowers and healthy vegetables. Children ran around playing games while their parents worked or talked with neighbors. "We have about 200 people living here," Steve explained as he showed them around. "Most of us came from farming worlds closer to Earth. We wanted somewhere quiet where we could raise our families in peace." They walked past a small school where a woman with brown hair was teaching a group of children about Earth's history. "That's Kate Phillips, our teacher," Steve said. "She makes sure all our kids know where they came from, even though most of them have never seen Earth." Jake watched the children listening to their lesson. There were about 30 kids of different ages all sitting quietly and paying attention. He noticed twin children, a boy and a girl who looked about 8 years old. They were asking lots of questions about the old days when humans traveled to the stars in big ships. "Those are Alex and Emma Walsh," Steve said, noticing Jake's interest. "Smart kids. They're always asking about what it's like out there among the stars." "Do any of your young people ever leave to join the Federation?" Lisa asked. "Some do," Steve nodded. "But most stay here. It's a good life. Safe, peaceful, with plenty of food and clean air." What more could anyone want? As they walked through the colony, Jake felt proud of what humanity had built. These people had traveled thousands of light years from Earth to create something beautiful and peaceful. They worked hard, took care of each other, and were raising their children to be good people. But somewhere in the back of his mind, Jake felt a tiny bit of worry. The galaxy was a big place, and not everyone in it was as peaceful. As humans had become, there were species out there who still believed that might made right, who thought that taking things by force was easier than earning them through honest work. The Hegemony Empire was one of those groups. Jake had read reports about them testing Federation borders, sending ships close to human space, and then backing away when Federation patrols showed up. So far, nothing serious had happened, but Jake wondered if their peaceful way of life might be making them seem weak to more aggressive species. He pushed those thoughts away as Mayor Collins led them to his house for dinner. The food was delicious, and the conversation was warm and friendly. The colonists told stories about their lives on Haven's Rest, about the crops they were growing and the plans they had for expanding their settlement. As night fell and the Horizon's crew prepared to return to their ship, Jake shook hands with Steve Collins. "You've built something wonderful here," he said. "Thank you, Admiral. It's good to know that people like you are out there, keeping an eye on things and making sure the galaxy stays peaceful." Jake smiled and nodded, but as he looked up at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that their long era of peace might not last forever. 3 weeks had passed since Admiral Morrison left Haven's Rest. The colony had returned to its quiet daily routine. Children went to school, farmers tended their crops, and families gathered for dinner each evening. Nobody noticed the small ships watching them from the dark spaces between the planets. Warcast. Leader Zixandra studied the human settlement from her command ship. She was a tall reptilian creature with dark scales and cold yellow eyes. Like all members of the Hegemony Empire, she believed that strength was everything and that peaceful species were meant to be conquered. "The humans have no real defenses," reported her second-in-command, a smaller reptilian named Vexstar, a few small patrol craft, some basic shields around their buildings. "Nothing that would stop a real attack." Zixandra nodded. "Emperor Vextal's plan is clever. Instead of fighting their military, we take what they value most, their young ones." The plan had been developing for months. The Hegemony had studied human behavior and learned that these strange mammals had incredibly strong feelings about their offspring. Unlike reptilian species who laid eggs and left them to survive on their own, humans spent years caring for their children. They would do anything to protect them. "Begin the attack," Zixandra ordered. The Hegemony ships moved fast. They came from 3 directions at once, using the planet's moons to hide their approach. The colony's warning systems barely had time to sound before the alien vessels were overhead. Steve Collins was having breakfast with his wife when the alarms started ringing. He had never heard those alarms before, not in 12 years of living on Haven's Rest. "What's happening?" his wife asked, looking scared. Before Steve could answer, the windows lit up with bright flashes from the sky. Strange ships were flying over their town, and beams of blue light were shooting down at the buildings. "Everyone get to the emergency shelters," Steve shouted into his communicator. But the attack was unlike anything they had prepared for. The blue beams didn't destroy buildings or hurt people. Instead, they made humans fall asleep instantly. At the school, Kate Phillips was trying to get her students to the safety room when the blue light hit her. She fell to the floor, unconscious. All around the colony, adults were collapsing as the Hegemony forces used their neural disruptors, but the weapons were set to only affect adult humans. The children remained awake, and aware 8-year-old Emma Walsh shook her unconscious mother, trying to wake her up. Mom, please wake up," she cried. Her twin brother Alex grabbed her hand. "Something's wrong with all the grown-ups," Alex said, his voice shaking. Round them, other children were crying and calling for their parents. The Hegemony soldiers landed in the middle of town. They were 7 feet tall, with armor that made them look like walking dragons. Their leader Zixandra pointed at the human children. Take them all, she ordered in her harsh voice. Ages 5 to 16. Leave the babies and the adults. The soldiers moved quickly through the colony. They found 12-year-old Sam Griffin hiding in the medical center where his parents worked. They discovered 15-year-old Maya Brooks, trying to wake up her father, Mayor Collins. One by one, they gathered all the older children. "Let us go," Maya shouted at the soldiers. She was the oldest of the children and felt responsible for the younger ones. "Why are you doing this?" The reptilian soldiers didn't answer. They herded 23 terrified children onto their ships. Emma Walsh clutched her brother's hand so tightly it hurt. Around them, younger children were crying for their mothers and fathers. "Don't be scared," Maya whispered to the little ones. "Someone will come for us. The Federation will come." But as the hegemony ships lifted off from Haven's Rest, carrying the children away from their families, Maya wasn't sure if she believed her own words. Hours later, the adults began to wake up. Steve Collins opened his eyes to find his wife crying over him. "The children," she sobbed. "They took all the children." Steve stumbled to his feet and looked around. The colony was intact, but eerily quiet. No children's laughter echoed from the playground. No young voices called out as they played in the streets. Dr. Susan Wright, who ran the medical center, was checking on other adults when she realized her son Sam was gone. "Where's Sam?" she screamed. "Where's my boy?" The truth hit everyone at the same time. The aliens had taken their children and left the adults alive to suffer. It was crueler than simply destroying the colony. They had torn families apart. Steve found the colony's emergency communicator and sent out a desperate message to any Federation ship that might hear it. "This is Haven's Rest Colony. We have been attacked. Unknown aliens have taken our children. 23 kids, ages 5 to 16. Please help us. Please." The message traveled through space at the speed of light, but even that seemed to slow. Every minute that passed meant their children were getting farther away. Meanwhile, aboard the hegemony command ship, Emperor Vextal was pleased with the success of the mission. He was an ancient reptilian ruler who had conquered dozens of worlds. His long life had taught him that fear was more powerful than any weapon. "Send the message to the human government," he ordered his communications officer. "Well, tell them we have their young ones. Tell them what we want in return." The message was broadcast across all human communication channels. Emperor Vextal's cold voice reached every human world at the same time. "I am Emperor Vextal of the Hegemony Empire. We have captured 23 human children from one of your colonies. They are alive and unharmed, but they will not remain. So if you do not meet our demands..." On Earth, President Martha Lewis was in an emergency meeting when the message played. She watched in horror as the alien ruler continued. "You will surrender 12 star systems to our empire. These systems include your military training worlds and your main shipyards. You have 72 of your hours to agree to our terms. You refuse. We will execute one child every hour until you surrender." The message ended, but not before showing brief images of the captured children. Emma and Alex Walsh holding hands in a dark cell. Maya Brooks trying to comfort younger children. Sam Griffin looking scared but trying to be brave. President Lewis stared at the screen long after it went dark. In 3,000 years of peace, humanity had never faced anything like this. They had protocols for natural disasters, for diplomatic problems, for trade disputes, but nobody had ever planned for someone taking human children as hostages, said her chief advisor, a man named Peter Hayes. "We need to call an emergency session of the Federation Council." Martha nodded, but her hands were shaking. She thought about her own grandchildren, safe on Earth. She thought about the parents on Haven's Rest, waking up to find their babies gone. For the first time in 3 millennia, humanity faced a choice between their principles and their children. The peaceful civilization they had built was about to be tested in a way nobody had ever imagined. The 72-hour countdown had begun. The news hit Earth like a lightning bolt. Within hours, every human world knew about the children taken from Haven's Rest on busy city streets. People stopped walking and stared at public screens showing the Emperor's message. In Quiet Farm, towns, families gathered around their communication devices, holding their own children closer. President Martha Lewis, stood before the cameras in the Federation's main building on Earth. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with something that had been sleeping in humanity for 3,000 years. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today someone made a terrible mistake. They thought our love for peace made us weak. They thought our care for life made us helpless. They were wrong." She paused, and when she spoke, again her words carried the weight of an entire species' anger. "For 3,000 years we have chosen peace over war. We have built our civilization on the idea that talking is better than fighting, that protecting life is more important than taking it. We still believe these things. But today, we remember something else about ourselves. We remember that there is nothing in this universe more dangerous than someone who threatens our children." The president's speech was broadcast to every human world. As people listened, something ancient stirred in their hearts. Parents looked at their children, felt a fierce protectiveness that their peaceful ancestors had almost forgotten. Dr. Peter Hayes worked deep in the Terran archives. It's a massive underground facility that stored humanity's complete history. Was a military historian, one of the few people who still studied the old ways of war. Most humans considered his work outdated and pointless. Not anymore. "Computer, unlock military archives. Authorization level alpha," Peter said to the main system. "Dr. Hayes, these files have been sealed for 3,000 years. Are you certain you want to access them?" "Yes. Open everything. Battle tactics, weapon designs, strategic planning, all of it." The computer hesitated for a moment, as if it understood the significance of what was happening. Then the screens around Peter lit up with information that humanity had deliberately forgotten. Ship designs built for war instead of exploration. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Military strategies that had once conquered half the galaxy. Peter read through the files with growing amazement. Humanity hadn't just been good at war in the ancient times. It'd been terrifyingly good at it. Their ancestors had developed ways of fighting that were so effective, so ruthless, that they had scared themselves into 3,000 years of peace. "We're going to need all of this," he whispered to himself. Admiral Jake Morrison was halfway home from his exploration mission when he received the emergency message. He read it 3 times before he could believe what he was seeing. The peaceful colony he had visited just weeks ago was now a place of grief and terror. "Captain Rodriguez, change course for Earth immediately. Maximum speed." "Sir, that will put a lot of strain on the engines," Ben warned. "I don't care if we burn out every power cell on this ship. We're going home." Dr. Lisa Carter was in her laboratory when she heard the news. She had been analyzing plant samples from their recent mission, thinking about how to help colonies grow better crops. Now, she was thinking about something completely different. "Ben," she called to Captain Rodriguez over the ship's communication system. "I want to volunteer for the rescue mission. Lisa, you're a scientist, not a soldier. I'm also a mother. I have 2 children back on Earth. If someone took them, I would want every parent in the galaxy to come looking for them." All across human space, the same scene was playing out. Parents were volunteering to join the rescue mission. Engineers were studying old weapon designs. Peaceful merchant ships were being converted into warships on the industrial world of New Pittsburgh. Factory workers labored around the clock. Assembly lines that had been making farming equipment were now producing military hardware. The massive orbital shipyards above Earth, which had spent centuries building exploration vessels, were now constructing their first warships in 3. Millennia Commander Nick Parker had been teaching military history at the Federation Academy. His students usually took his classes because they were easy, not because they cared about ancient battles. Today, his classroom was packed with officers wanting to learn everything they could about warfare. The key to understanding human military success, Nick explained to his eager audience, is that we never fought for territory or resources. We fought for each other. When humans go to war, they don't just fight with their minds or their weapons. They fight with their hearts. He pulled up holographic displays showing ancient battle formations. Our ancestors developed something called protective fury. It's what happens when someone threatens the things we love most. It makes us stronger, faster, and more determined than any enemy expects. The class listened with an intensity Nick had never seen before. These were officers who had spent their careers exploring space and helping colonies. Now they were learning how to destroy anyone who threatened their people. Meanwhile, in the cold prison cells of the Hegemony Station, the captured children were trying to stay brave. Maya Brooks, at 15, the oldest of the group, had taken charge of keeping everyone's spirits up. "My dad always said that humans take care of each other," she told the younger children. "Even if we're far from home, we're still family. And families never abandon each other." 8-year-old Emma Walsh nodded, though she was scared. "My mom told me that humans are good at finding solutions to problems. Maybe they'll find a way to get us back without giving the bad aliens what they want." Her brother Alex squeezed her hand. "They'll come for us. I know they will." The hegemony guards who watched the children were puzzled by their behavior. Most species would have been completely broken by now, crying and begging to be released.
Ow.
But these human young ones were actually trying to take care of each other. It was a strange behavior that the reptilian soldiers didn't understand. Back on Earth, President Lewis was meeting with her military advisors. The room was full of people who had never planned for a real war. They were diplomats and peacekeepers, not generals and admirals. "Ma'am," said Admiral Morrison, who had just arrived, from his mission. "I've been studying the old military files. Humanity used to have something called a fleet doctrine. When our children were threatened, we didn't just send one ship or one army. We sent everything." "Everything?" the president asked. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource we had. The old records show that when humans fought to protect their families, they didn't hold anything back. They used every advantage they could find." Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "Ma'am, I've been analyzing the hegemony's military capabilities. They're strong, but they're used to fighting species that follow predictable patterns. They've never faced an enemy that fights the way humans do when they're truly angry." President Lewis looked around the room at faces that had been peaceful just days ago. Now they showed a determination that she had never seen before. "How long before our first ships are ready?" 48 hours for the first battle group," Admiral Morrison replied. "We're converting every vessel we can find. Merchant ships, passenger liners, even mining vessels. If it can fly and carry weapons, we're turning it into a warship."
What?
President nodded. "Do it. Send a message to every human world. Tell them that we're coming for our children. Tell them that anyone who wants to help is welcome." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of humans volunteered to join the rescue mission. Parents who had never held weapons were learning to use them. Engineers who had built peaceful machines were designing instruments of war. 3,000 years, humanity had been the galaxy's peacekeepers. They had solved problems with words and helped other species live in harmony. But now, for the first time in millennia, they were preparing to do something they had almost forgotten how to do. They were preparing to fight a war. And this time, they were fighting for something more precious than territory or resources. They were fighting for their children. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had once been so good at, or that they had scared themselves into 3,000 years of peace. The first human battle fleet in 3,000 years launched from Earth's moon. 200 ships of every size and type moved together through space like a school of angry fish. At the front flew the TFS Retribution, Admiral Morrison's flagship, followed by vessels with names that spoke of humanity's new mood: TFS Vengeance, TFS Fury, and TFS Justice. Dr. Lisa Carter stood on the medical deck of the Retribution, checking supplies that she hoped she would never need to use. Around her, other crew members were making similar preparations. These were people who had spent their lives exploring peaceful worlds and helping colonies grow. Now they were heading into their first real battle. "I keep thinking about those children," Lisa said to Captain Rodriguez, who was inspecting the ship's new weapon systems. "Emma and Alex, that little girl who asked so many questions about the stars?" Ben nodded grimly. "I was supposed to be a ceremonial officer. I thought the most dangerous thing I'd ever face was a broken communications array. Now I'm learning how to target enemy ships." "Are you scared?" Lisa asked. Ben was quiet for a moment, terrified but not of dying. "I'm scared of what we might have to become to get those kids back." Far away in hegemony space, Strategic Cast Corvex was studying reports about the human military buildup. He was the Empire's chief military analyst, responsible for predicting enemy behavior and recommending tactics. The humans are coming. Just as Emperor Vexel predicted, he reported to his superiors, but their response is larger than expected. Intelligence suggests they have mobilized their entire fleet. Warcast leader Zixandra, who had led the raid on Haven's Rest, laughed at the report. Let them come. 3,000 years of peace have made them soft. Their ships are built for exploration, not war. Their crews have never seen real battle. Still, Kervex warned, we should not underestimate them. The historical records show that humans were once formidable warriors. That was ancient history, Zixandra dismissed. A species cannot maintain fighting skills for 3 millennia without practice. They're merchants and diplomats now, not soldiers. The first test of these assumptions came at the border system of Tau Ceti, a hegemony patrol fleet of 12. Warships was stationed there to intercept any human rescue attempt. They were experienced veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds for the Empire. Admiral Morrison's advanced scouts detected the enemy ships long before the main human fleet arrived. 12 heavy cruisers reported Commander Nick Parker, who had joined the mission as tactical advisor. They're positioned to block our route to the prison station. What would our ancestors have done? Admiral Morrison asked. Nick studied the tactical display. According to the old records, humans specialized in something called emotional warfare. They didn't just try to destroy enemy ships. They tried to break the enemy's will to fight by doing things that seemed impossible. Explain. Human tactics were unpredictable because they were based on feelings rather than pure logic. An enemy could calculate what the smart thing to do was, but they couldn't predict what someone would do when they were fighting for their children. Admiral Morrison nodded. Then let's show them something they won't expect. The battle began. When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the middle of the hegemony formation, it was a dangerous move that could have destroyed both sides, but it caught the reptilian commanders completely off guard. Impossible, muttered the hegemony fleet commander. They jumped directly into our formation. It violates every rule of space combat. What happened next violated even more rules. Instead of forming neat battle lines like civilized species, the human ships scattered in all directions. Some attacked from above, others from below. A few ships actually rammed hegemony vessels, using their stronger hulls to damage enemy weapons while their crews fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. Captain Rodriguez found himself commanding a boarding party on an enemy ship. He had never done anything like this before, but the training was coming back to him as if it had been sleeping in his genes. Secure the engine room, he ordered his team. We need this ship intact for intelligence. The hegemony soldiers they fought were bigger and stronger than humans, but they had never faced enemies who fought with such desperate determination. Human Marines advanced through enemy fire not because they were braver, but because they kept thinking about frightened. Children in prison cells, Dr. Carter worked frantically in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members. But she noticed something strange. Despite the intensity of the battle, human casualties were surprisingly light. It was as if their anger was protecting them, making them faster and more careful than they had any right to be. How are we doing? This, she wondered aloud as she bandaged a young officer's arm. My grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, the injured man replied. She said humans fight differently when their families are in danger. We become something more than human. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, all 12 hegemony ships had been destroyed or captured, while the human fleet had lost only 3 vessels. More importantly, they had captured several enemy officers who could provide information about where the children were being held. News. On dozens of worlds, alien species watched the battle recordings with growing amazement and fear. The peaceful humans they had known for 3 millennia were gone, replaced by something that fought like the ancient legends come to life. The hegemony's military command was in chaos. Strategic Cast Kervex stared at the battle reports in disbelief. This is impossible. 12 experienced warships defeated by converted merchant vessels. Emperor Vextel was less concerned with the details than with the implications. Long until their main fleet reaches our prison station? Their current speed? Perhaps 36 hours? Double the guards around the human children. If we cannot stop their fleet, we may need to use the hostages as shields. But in the prison cells, the children were beginning to sense that something was changing. The hegemony guards seemed nervous, talking in hushed voices and constantly checking their weapons. Maya Brooks, who had been listening carefully to fragments of conversation, managed to pick up a few words in the alien language. What she heard made her heart race with hope. "They're coming," she whispered to Emma and Alex Walsh. "I think our people are coming for us." Emma's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Really? You're sure?"
Ow.
"The guards are scared. They keep saying something that sounds like human fleet. I think there's going to be a rescue." Alex squeezed his sister's hand. "I told you they wouldn't leave us here." Back on the human flagship, Admiral Morrison was studying intelligence gathered from captured hegemony officers. The prison station was heavily defended, surrounded by the Empire's most elite forces. Direct assault would be incredibly dangerous. "Sir," said Dr. Carter, who had been analyzing the enemy's psychology, "I've been thinking about what makes humans different from other species." "What do you mean?" "Most species fight for logical reasons, territory, resources, survival. But humans fight for emotional reasons. Love, loyalty, protection of family. The hegemony understands logical warfare, but they don't understand emotional warfare." Admiral Morrison considered this. "You're suggesting we do something they won't expect?" "I'm suggesting we do something no rational species would do. Something so crazy that they won't have a defense prepared for it." As the human fleet moved deeper into enemy territory, word of their approach spread fear throughout the hegemony empire. These were not the peaceful explorers that had been mapping the galaxy for centuries. These were the descendants of the warriors, who had once been so good at war that they had deliberately given it up. The galaxy was remembering something it had almost forgotten. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their willingness to sacrifice everything for the people they loved. And now, for the first time in 3,000 years, that strength was fully awake and heading straight for anyone who dared to threaten human children. The final battle was coming, and the hegemony was about to learn why humanity had spent 3 millennia trying to forget how to fight. The hegemony prison station hung in space like a metal fortress, surrounded by the Empire's most powerful warships. Emperor Vex Stahl himself had come to oversee the final battle, bringing his personal guard fleet. He was confident that the humans, no matter how determined, could not break through such defenses. "They are fools to come here," the Emperor told his commanders. "This station has never been conquered. When their fleet is destroyed, all of human space will surrender." But Warcast leader Zixandra felt less certain. She had watched the recordings of the battle at Tau Ceti, studying how the humans fought. "Your Majesty, they do not fight like any species we have encountered before. Perhaps we should consider executing the hostages now, before they arrive." "No," Vextal replied firmly. "The children are our only advantage. As long as we hold them, the humans cannot risk a full assault." The Emperor was wrong. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, surrounded by officers who had transformed from peaceful explorers into determined warriors. Dr. Lisa Carter was there too. It's no longer just a scientist, but a fierce protector ready to fight for every human child. "Sir, we're detecting massive enemy forces around the station," reported Captain Rodriguez. "At least 50 heavy warships, plus the station's own defenses. They outnumber us 3-1. Good, Admiral Morrison said quietly. "That means they brought everything they have. When we win this battle, the hegemony will have nothing left to threaten our people with." Commander Nick Parker studied the tactical displays. "Admiral, there's no way to approach the station without heavy casualties. The enemy has positioned their ships in perfect defensive formations. Then we don't approach the station," Morrison replied. "We go through them." What happened next became known throughout galactic history as the Hour of Fury. The human fleet didn't try to sneak around the enemy defenses or find a weak spot to exploit. Instead, they did something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They attacked everything at once. 200 human ships charged directly into the heart of the enemy formation, like an arrow aimed at the station itself. Some vessels targeted enemy warships, others headed for the station's weapon platforms. and a few brave crews flew their ships directly into hegemony command centers, sacrificing themselves to clear the way for others. Possible, breathed Strategicast. Corvex as he watched the battle unfold. They're attacking in every direction at once. No species fights like this. The hegemony forces, trained for orderly battles between organized fleets, found themselves overwhelmed by the chaos of human, emotional warfare. Every time they tried to form a defensive line, human ships would break through it by doing things that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. Captain Rodriguez led a boarding team onto the prison station itself. His ship crashed through the station's outer hull, and he and his Marines fought their way through corridors filled with enemy soldiers. These were not the same peaceful officers who had been exploring space just weeks ago. They moved with deadly purpose, thinking only of reaching the captured children. "Medical bay this way," shouted Sergeant Tony Garcia, a former teacher who had enlisted the day after the kidnapping. He and his team had studied the station's layout during the flight here, memorizing every corridor that might lead to the prison cells. The hegemony guards they encountered had never faced enemies like this. Human Marines advanced through enemy fire with a determination that seemed to make them immune to fear. When reptilian soldiers tried to surrender, the humans would accept the surrender, and then keep moving toward their objective without slowing down. Dr. Carter followed close behind, the combat teams carrying medical supplies for the children. She had insisted on being part of the rescue, despite having no military training. "I'm a mother," she had told Admiral Morrison. "Those children need to see a friendly face when we find them." In the prison cells, the children could hear the sounds of battle getting closer. Explosions echoed through the walls, and the lights flickered as power systems were damaged. "They're here, Maya," Brooks told the younger children. "I can hear human voices in the corridors." 8-year-old Emma Walsh pressed her face to the small window in their cell door. "I see lights coming this way, and I hear someone speaking English." Her brother Alex put his arm around her. "We're going home, Em. We're really going home." The cell door suddenly exploded inward, and Captain Rodriguez appeared in the opening. He was covered in dirt, and his uniform was torn, but his face showed relief and joy when he saw the children. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice completely different from the commanding tone he had been using with his Marines. "I'm Captain Rodriguez with the Terran Federation. I've come to take you home." For a moment, the children just stared at him, and Emma Walsh began to cry, not from fear but from overwhelming happiness. "You came for us. You really came." "Of course we did," Rodriguez said, kneeling down to her level. "No one takes human children and gets away with it." Dr. Carter appeared behind him, immediately moving to check on the children's health. "Are any of you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" "We're okay," Maya Brooks answered, though she was also crying now. "They didn't hurt us. They just kept us locked up." As the rescue team led the children toward the evacuation shuttles, they had to pass through areas where the battle was still raging. But something remarkable happened. Every human Marine they encountered stopped what they were doing to make sure the children were safe. Hardened warriors who had been fighting desperately for their lives suddenly became gentle protectors, forming shields around the rescued hostages. Meanwhile, Emperor Vexthel made one final desperate attempt to salvage his plan. Realizing that his forces were being overwhelmed, he personally headed for the prison area with his elite guards, intending to execute the children before the humans could rescue them. He arrived just as the last group of children was being evacuated. 15-year-old Maya Brooks was helping some of the younger ones toward the shuttle when the Emperor and his guards appeared in the corridor. "Stop," Vexthel commanded in English. "The young ones will die before they leave this station." Maya had spent weeks listening to hegemony communications, learning how their technology worked. While the Emperor was making his speech, she quietly activated the corridor's emergency lockdown system, trapping him and his guards behind blast doors. "Sorry," she called through the door, "but nobody threatens my little brothers and sisters." Sergeant Garcia, who had been covering their retreat, looked at Maya with amazement. "How did you know how to do that?" "I paid attention," Maya replied simply. "My dad always said that knowledge is the best weapon." As the last shuttle left the prison station, Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the Retribution. The battle was over. The hegemony fleet had been destroyed or scattered, Emperor Vexthel was captured, and all 23 children were safe. Medical reports coming in, Dr. Carter announced over the communications system. All children are healthy and unharmed. They're scared and tired, but they're going to be fine. The Admiral felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile. But the victory came with a price. Humanity had rediscovered something about themselves that they had tried to forget. They were capable of incredible violence when their families were threatened. The peaceful civilization they had built for 3,000 years had been changed forever, as the human fleet began its journey home, carrying the rescued children back to their families. News of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. Other alien species, many of whom had grown comfortable under human protection, now looked at their protectors with new eyes. The message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Humanity would choose peace whenever possible. But they would never, again, be helpless. The capacity for war still lived in their hearts, held in check only by their desire to protect rather than conquer. On Haven's Rest, Mayor Steve Collins waited with the other parents for their children to come home. When the shuttles finally landed and Emma and Alex Walsh ran into their mother's arms, the entire colony wept with joy. "We knew you'd come for us," Emma told her parents through her tears. Her father hugged her tightly. "Always," he promised. "We will always come for you." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the centuries. There's no force in the universe more dangerous than someone fighting to protect their family. And humanity considered every human child their family. The 3,000 years of peace were over, but something better had taken its place. An age where peace was protected by strength, where love was backed by the promise that anyone who threatened the innocent would face the full fury of humanity. The children were home. The galaxy was safe. And humanity had remembered who they truly were.